How you doing today? It's Miranda back with another episode of Unveiled. I hope everyone's doing well out there and enjoying your summer because it's almost over. Goes by fast, doesn't it? Seemed like just yesterday was like June. That's okay. It's actually barely 70 here today. We've been having really hot weather this summer where I live, and so I guess it's a nice little break. We'll take it, although it just kind of feel fall-like, but anyways, so today I want to talk about the power of belief, um, the power of the mind, power of conviction, and what that can do to you and where it can take you. So, in my last podcast, I had mentioned that I feel plugged back in, right? I feel like myself for the first time in a really, really long time. You know, I'm back, I said. But what did I mean by that exactly? Back from what? Where have I been these past years? So, for those of you who have been following me along since the beginning, first of all, thank you. You have heard me talk about the fact that because of Christianity, I gave up a lot of things. Um, that was the sacrifice that was required of me to walk this fine line, right? In order for me to be the good, holy girl, to become the new creature in Christ, that meant tossing out anything and everything that didn't line up with the ideals of churchianity, right? You know, all of those uncompromising fundamentalist doctrines that are just rife with lists and rituals, boundaries, superstition, you know, laced up with fear and tied in a tight, suffocating bow. You know, music, movies, TV shows, books, people, you name it. They were all placed under the exacting microscope of dogma, you know, the yardstick by which everything was measured, you know, if whatever it was that you were putting there did not meet the holy requirements, you know, it had to be tossed away and thrown out. And I threw out a lot of stuff. I mean, literally, in the literal sense, I threw stuff away. I literally threw away my entire book collection. Okay. Look, I'm a book lover. I was constantly reading. I worked at a bookstore from 1995 to 1998. I don't know if any of you remember B. Dalton's, right? The mall stores. Um, and I collected a lot of books over the years, you know. So needless to say that when the time came for me to chuck them out, I had several garbage bags full of books, just put in the garbage. I did the same thing with DVDs and movies, right? And CDs. And let me just tell you, I had rare pieces. You know, I had CDs that were numbered copies, imports, hard to find. Um, Hard to find music, you know, and I just threw it all away like it was nothing. And if you're wondering why I didn't sell these items or donate them, well, that's because, you know, you can't pass on these evil things to anybody else. Oh, no, 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 my friends. No, they had to be discarded because then you'd be responsible for passing evil on to other people. So then there was the disposal of all of my writing, poetry, prose, short stories, journals that I had kept since 15 years old. Any and everything that I had written prior to this point in my life, I literally ripped up, put it in a box, taped it up, and threw it in the garbage. And this act was no small thing because writing was my life. I have been writing since I was 10 years old. It's all that I've ever loved and carried with me throughout my ridiculous, unstable, transient life. Actually, it carried me, to be honest with you. A lot of times it was my sanity, my outlet. You know, being a writer was all that I have ever wanted to be. I've also mentioned before that I used to have reoccurring nightmares about tornadoes, right? And it was always the same. I would be in a house, I'd look out the window, tornadoes are bearing down on me, right? They're coming. And the only thing that I would do is I would scoop up all of my journals, all of my writing, all of my poetry, my notebooks, and I would throw them into a closet to protect and save them. And that's how much it meant to me. And yet, there I was, one day, sitting on the floor of my office with all of my journals, convinced in that moment that this is exactly what I'm supposed to do, that God was the one telling me to throw it all away, that He was the one that led me to that place and that space in this time, right? And I'm not going to lie, I actually did have a moment of doubt as I sat there. I hesitated because this was my writing. So I picked up one of my journals and I opened it and I started to read through it. And as I did, the thought that went through my mind was, these are all demonic prophecies and I do not want them in my life. And then I set about systematically tearing up each and every journal, all of my writing. I threw it all away. And I can honestly say that this is one of the biggest regrets that I have from this foray into Christianity, because I can never get that stuff back. It is irreplaceable. Music, movies, books, you can replace all of that stuff. My writing, years of me sicking up my life with pain and sadness onto paper, my poetry, that's gone forever. I can never get that back. So that was my fever dream, right? My nightmare come true. Some tornado came through and destroying all of my beloved treasures. But turns out that I was that storm. So here I am, years later, having now abandoned that pious Christian life completely, just regretting all of those decisions. I've spent the last few months actually reclaiming almost all of what I renounced. The things that I used to love, that I was for a time convinced that I wanted nothing to do with and never would again. Come to find out, I still love those things. Who knew, right? So one time, like last month, my husband went out with a friend and I had the house to myself. It's a rare thing. And so I decided to go on a YouTube bender, right? I have it on my Roku. And so I opened up YouTube and I started looking up all this music that I used to listen to. And so I was always kind of drawn to like music that was different, that was obscure. It was hard or dark or ethereal, visceral. I loved goth, I loved techno, industrial, rave, shoegaze stuff, And this album came to my mind that I hadn't thought about in a really long time. And the name of the album was called Fairy Tales in Slavery by Miranda Sexgarden. And so I pulled it up, and as I sat there listening to it for the first time in years, I was instantly transported, remembering just how much I loved that album. And I realized I still did. And at first I was happy. I was overjoyed to have rediscovered this album, but then the joy kind of turned to anger. I was angry that I threw all of that stuff away because of religion, right? But the real truth of the matter is it wasn't just stuff that I threw away. I had thrown out myself as well. All of my likes, all of the things that I loved, all that I was, I just tossed it aside in order to try to be something that I wasn't, to fit into this mold, to listen to Christian music, read Christian books, and do this. And just anything that outside of that paradigm had to be discarded. And I couldn't have anything to do with it. That's how seriously I took it. So as I mentioned in the last podcast, I recently feel like I had a watershed moment not too long ago where I feel like a switch had been flipped, right? That I felt turned back on. And I actually got this vision with those thoughts of a plug being connected to a socket. So what does that mean? That I'm plugged back into me, who I am, what I'm drawn to. I am no longer living in self-denial, self-flagellation, guilt, or condemnation, putting myself inside of a box. I recently started like picking up TV shows that I used to love. And not only that, but ones that I completely would have avoided because they would be considered taboo. I'm once again listening to the music that I love, reading books that I would have avoided like the plague or would never have considered based on subject matter alone. Because now that I have come out of churchianity and programming, instead of measuring everything with the yardstick, I go by gut and intuition. This is where I have been parked, right? I decide on that, the intuition, discernment on whether or not something will serve me well, if it's something I want to watch, should listen to or read, right? And it's honestly so freeing to listen to me, to my inner voice, where all of this stuff is concerned, not some outside influence or implanted conditioning, right? And so during this transition back to myself, I had this revelation, like the light bulb came on, right? After all of those years of being fully committed and immersed in Christianity and churchianity, after all of the changes that I made for it and in it, even the ones that I felt were spirit led and divinely inspired, all of the things I gave up, that I put down, that I no longer considered me anymore because I was a new creation in Christ, that having set Christianity fully aside, realize that I still love, like, and am drawn to pretty much all of that same type of stuff that I organically shed during that phase of my life. It's like, what exactly does that say? What does that say about me, about the process, about those years that I spent obeying God, being the good Christian girl, feeling divinely led to get rid of these things? And then now I come to realize that I still love those things. And it made me question, was the power of belief so strong? Was the programming so effective that in those moments I truly thought that it was God telling me to discard all of those things, even to the point of chucking my poetry in my writing? Had I been entranced and brainwashed, beguiled? Listen, I cannot even begin to express to you how absolutely certain I was that this was God, this was Jesus, this was Holy Spirit leading me, guiding me, directing me. And not just in that moment, but in so many others. And was that a perfect example of the power of conviction, suggestion, belief, persuasion through fear? Believing that these things are evil and demonic, that they're going to bring negative and bad consequences to my life, right? That's fear-based. But now that those fear-based doctrines and beliefs have been completely expunged from my mind and my heart and my soul, almost everything that was and existed in my life before all of that, it's just back. Game on, right? Power up. I feel strangely revitalized and returned to myself and awakened. Like the color has been restored to my life. They say hindsight is 2020, and in retrospect, I can absolutely see how superstitious thinking led me to carry out that act. How indoctrination and fear created a miasma in my mind, blinding me, choking me, the real me out. It cast a spell on me in a sense, right? It put me to sleep, caused me to believe that this was God speaking to me. Because now that I'm awake, I know that God would never demand that of me or require this of me, especially to be considered holy and acceptable, to gain favor and audience with Him. But at that time, I didn't know any different. I was absolutely convinced it was all true and that was what I was supposed to be doing. And, so I can't help but wonder, how the hell did something get such a hold of me to cause me to do all of that stuff, right? To throw away something that was such an intricate part of me in my life, something that meant the absolute world to me. What could be so persuasive that it made me willing to just give it up, toss it out away for good? to participate in such an irrevocable act? I was beguiled. I was under churchianity's bewitchment. That's how I feel now. This is just my perception. This is my perspective now, is where I am. This is what I feel. And I know that it might seem strange, a strange statement using a term like bewitchment with church. But I've actually come to see that Christianity does operate in that manner, implanting suggestions, hypnotizing people, casting spells, as it were, from their pulpits, right? Entrancing, manipulating, persuading, using fear as its basis and foundation. And they do it in just such a way that most people can't see it or recognize it that as such. It's not blatant. And this is at its core about the power of belief and how easily that can be manipulated, changed, twisted, transformed by suggestion, beguilement, fear. Here's a fun fact. When you are in a heightened state of fear, that is actually when you are the most susceptible to suggestion. When people are in a state of fear, when they're in a state of fear, they are most likely to believe something that is suggested, especially if that suggestion may seem like an answer or a form of help. You see it all the time. Take the medical field, for example. We're constantly bombarded with drug commercials every 5 minutes telling us that we're sick, we're diseased, we're unhealthy, we need this drug, we need that drug, go see your doctor. The only way to stay alive, is to constantly take all these drugs. See your doctor often, get tested regularly. This induces a state of fear. It is a form of hypnotism. It is constant repetition with the same message over and over. So people can and absolutely do think themselves sick. Is that the way it is in every single case? No, but it happens, right? That's the power of belief. That is the power of the mind. The mind is far more formidable and incredible than we even understand or know. I have heard plenty of stories about healthy people becoming sick because they believe that they were. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Because of that, how many people are on a steady diet of prescription drugs? Pretty much everybody I know is. Here's a quick fact for you. The top 5 farm companies make an average of almost $100 billion a year. Not million, billion. So would you then say that their hypnotic fear campaigns are effective? Right? Think about it. But does not religion do the very same thing in its own way? They induce a state of fear so they can then insert the suggestion. Do you know where you're going when you die? Hellfire and Satan await you for eternity. Your fallen nature keeps you from God. He can't hear you, sinner. You were born wicked, fallen. You cannot save yourself. But wait, we have the answer. We hold your get out of hell card. All you got to do is listen to us. Do as we say. Take our pills. See us regularly. Get your weekly spiritual checkup. Talk to our professionals. Let them diagnose you, give you advice, direct you, help you. Take 3 prayers, a Bible study, 2 deliverance sessions, and see me in a week. And do not forget to take your daily dose of the word. It is your spiritual food, You can never overdose on the word. This is fear. This is addiction. This is dependence. Because if you don't adhere to the directives, if you don't follow the protocols, then you're in for a world of hurt, right? God will be mad, disappointed. You won't get blessed. You will lose your health, your money, your family, your job, your good standing with God. Satan is just waiting in the wings for you to slip up, mess up, so that he can be unleashed to teach you a lesson, right? So in hearing this, of course, you are going to want to do all of the right things to remain in God's good graces, to be blessed, to stay well, to cure what ails you. It's a balm for your soul sickness, my friend. There's something even more sinister underlying all of this, right? And that is the slippery way that these beliefs become so embedded that they cause you to do things that you wouldn't normally do. Think of a hypnotist up on stage. You go to see the magician, they hypnotize it, it gets people up on stage and they start clucking like a chicken. You wouldn't do that normally in everyday life, right? No. Okay. So they lead off with fear as the basis for their message. And then they implant their suggestions. And then if you continue with the program, these ideas then are consistently embedded into your mind, your heart, your soul, your conscious, your subconscious, right? It actually rewires your way of thinking. And then you begin to live and act out these things as if they were your own ideas, your beliefs now. You begin to hear and believe that God is telling you to do certain things based on these deeply installed ideas and suggestions that are packaged as irrefutable truth. It happens all the time. Now, that is to say, not all of these things are bad. Some of these God given directions are absolutely good, God given, right? You put faith in things for healing. I've seen healings and miracles and signs and wonders. I've seen all of that kind of things. I've had good changes in my life. I quit smoking when I first started all of this, and I did have good and positive changes. So it's not to say that it's bad all the time, okay? And I do believe that at times it was God's voice truly breaking through the trance and the brainwashing and speaking to my conscious and my heart. But sometimes the programming wins out. And when you are in the middle of it, you cannot see it for what it is. You can't tell the difference. Even when you get mixed messages, right? Ones that are contrary to each other. But what do you know? It's God talking. So you would better be listening and follow the direction. And that's what happened to me. At the time that I did these things, I did not feel forced. I absolutely felt like I was being divinely led. I believed they were divinely timed instructions. I felt like it was God saying, okay, you're ready for this now. And I obeyed, never thinking for 1 second that I would ever want these things back, that I would ever pick them up or reclaim them. No, 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 because I absolutely believed beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was going to be my life for as long as I lived. Sister Christian, good, holy, devoted, called. I had dreams of ministry. I got ordained. I got ordained. I know I've said it before, I very seriously took this very seriously. But I don't know if I want to say I was wrong, but I was misled. I felt beguiled and bewitched and persuaded, you know? I feel that way now. All of this made me realize, this is just what I want to say. All of this made me realize is that it is a form of hypnotism in a sense. It is the power of suggestion and belief. It shows just how strong of a pull and an influence it can have on us, right? On how we live, how we act, the way our minds can get rewired, what we think we're hearing, and the directions that we're receiving. And it has taken me the better part of 3 years to undo the 14 to 15 years that I spent steeped in churchianity. It's been 3 years of reading, thinking, meditating, writing, crying, venting, wondering, floundering. I have experienced a plethora of emotions, not all of them positive, not all of them negative. It's been quite a roller coaster, to be quite honest with you. I've written 3 books during this time. Writing is how I best work things out. This is my form of meditation, realization, and cleansing. I I was not seeking this out. I was not seeking to be free of the constraints of Christianity. It wasn't like that. It was where I was led. I was led out of the church. I was led out of religion, out of pretending and striving. I was led back to myself. Was it a divine leading? Why not? I think so, because to me, God is freedom. God is not a set of rules and doctrines. God would not create us limitless and then set limits on us just because. I truly believe that God wanted me to come back to myself. And I needed to come back to myself. I wasn't well. And in the last 3 years, so many inner wounds and traumas have been healed and done away with. I have finally come to know rest and peace, something that I've never experienced up in my life up until now, even during my Christianity phase. No matter how much I prayed and worshiped and read and studied and spoke the scriptures, it didn't bring me what I was looking for, what I desperately wanted. And to me, that is something that love wants and desires of us, right? Healing, freedom, liberty, intuition, connection, not obedience and disciplines, doctrines and dogmas. Does it not say I desire mercy and not sacrifice? And this just brings me to something else that I have learned through this whole process, right? And it's about the potential dangers of outside voices and influence over people, over our minds and our hearts and our lives, especially when it comes to spiritual guidance and development. We've been it's been embedded in us. And that we need a guru, we need a pastor, we need a teacher, we need someone who's more spiritually aware and mature. We got to be led. You just show us we're astray. We can't do this without you. We need someone who holds the keys to secret knowledge, that they have the answers that we seek. Doesn't matter if it's Christianity, New Age, if it's Muslim or Buddhist. They are always these super spiritual ones, right? Who have better and deeper connections than you. Or they're special, they're chosen, they're called, they're anointed, they hear better, they see clearer, they know more, they're tuned in, they're tapped in. So that means that you have to seek them out, right? And you have to listen to them. And what does that do? It squelches your own inner voice, your own intuition, your own discernment, possibly opening yourself up for manipulation, programming, indoctrination. It's far more subtle and sneaky than we know. Hiss said the serpent in the garden, I know the way to godliness. Does that not sound familiar? It becomes dangerous when there are people involved who are unhealed, who are themselves dealing with inner pain and anguish and demons. And let me tell you, every single person I know is doing just that, right? Even those that you may look up to and see as some spiritual giant. I know because I speak from experience. Again, not to pump myself up. This isn't one of those things, but I was a person that people looked up to. They sought out for spiritual advice. They called for direction and prayer, for healing, for hands laid on them and deliverance. And inside, the whole time, inside, I was soul sick and misguided, thinking I was hearing from God, twisted up in knots, riddled with fear, anxiety, panic, self loathing, hiding years of stored trauma that I wasn't even aware of. And that's why Christianity's influence worked on me and why I fell under its persuasion. I thought it would make me better. It would heal me. It would change me into something worth being. I suffered with self-esteem issues my whole life, unworthiness, you know? And Christianity preyed on vulnerability and pain while telling it loved me, that God loved me, And the programming was effective. And while it did have good outcomes, again, it also did damage in the process. It was hypnotic, it was beguiling, it was bewitching. I'm not trying to come and be some warning. I'm warning you, you better not. It has nothing to do with that. This is just me being honest with you about my personal experiences and perspectives. If it resonates with you, great. Just to let you know that you're not alone. And this is me just laying it out. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you leave church, stop listening to these teachers and that person, what have you. Just laying it out on my experience and how I see things from my perspective now that I'm out of it, now that I'm away from it. These are all just my thoughts, my realizations. And they might change. Who knows? I've changed so much over the last year that I am unrecognizable, but that's okay. I change a lot. All right. So I just want you to know that you have all that you need inside of you, right inside of you, to guide and direct you in the best ways and paths for your life and your journey. It's just a matter of taking the time to get quiet and listen and shutting everything else out. All the other voices, all of the programming, all of what you've read, what you've heard. Trust me, it gets in there. And I have a difficult time sometimes being quiet myself, but it's necessary and it's worth it. And by the way, I do still listen to other podcasts. I listen to people talking about their spiritual journeys and experiences, but the difference is that I now no longer measure myself by them or seek to apply their ideas and rituals to my life to make them mine so that I can be something or get something, right? Become more spiritual, have the answer. And I no longer seek to aspire to be like them because I am me, unapologetically Miranda. And now I am free to follow my own path. No more beguilement, no more bewitchment. Myself now reclaimed. I am liberated. And all I hope is the same for you as well. Wherever you are in life, just know that you are enough and you have it all within you. You are divinely created and you are a divine being. The light lives right on the inside of you, and you are constantly connected to source, to divine source. So I just want to tell you that, and that I love you, and that I'm here for you, and that we're all in this together. And yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to say today. And until next time, live free and shine bright, my friends. Have a wonderful day. See you next time.